everyone. Every so often, we have a guest who proves that recovery doesn't play favorites, no matter how tough the odds or how long the battle. Today, I'm both amazed and excited by the sheer tenacity of my incredible guest, who, after nearly 20 years of illness, didn't just find her missing piece of the recovery puzzle, she practically invented her own new pieces. If you're tuning in for the first time, I'm Raelan Agle. Here we explore real hope and tangible healing strategies for conditions like CFS and Long Covid. After conducting over 200 interviews with those who have walked this path, I can say with certainty, recovery isn't just a story, it is a reality for so many. My guest today, Teresa Hobbs, over in Salt Lake City, Utah, spent almost 2 decades sick with ME/CFS, and 5 of those years severely bedbound. Refusing to be sidelined permanently, she became her own health detective, piecing together her recovery from various strategies. I'm excited. Let's dive in. Teresa, ridiculously excited to have you here today and to hear about your journey. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for inviting me. This is awesome. I'm so excited to tell my story.
Yeah, there are, as we were saying before we started this, there are so many people in the world who are severely ill or have been ill for decades. And understandably, it can start to feel like there's no hope and you're never going to get past this. But what we're learning is that it's never been too long, you're never too far gone to recover. So really great to hear about your experience with this. So how did it start for you?
So for me, it started back in 2003. I was 26 years old, and that was the first time I saw any signs of symptoms. Things just kind of weren't right. I was working at an equestrian farm at the time. That was my first career. I have a couple. And I just noticed that I was really fatigued and was getting sick a lot. And eventually I got fired from that job. And when I came home, that was my first like crash. And, I was like having little moments of like blackouts, feeling really dizzy, felt like my blood sugar couldn't stabilize. And so I went to the doctor, of course, trying to figure out what it was. And all the conventional doctors did what they do. They take blood tests and they say, oh, everything's fine. And so I felt pretty dismissed because I knew things weren't fine. And so I went into the holistic world, of course, and started seeing more naturopathic physicians and was diagnosed with things like candida, like all the things, right? Epstein-Barr, we all kind of know this story. And hormone imbalances, stuff like that. And so I did a lot of stuff to try and treat that and didn't really move the needle. And then by about 2005, an acupuncturist diagnosed me with adrenal fatigue. So I was like, oh, I have something. My adrenals were like flatlined. And so I did a protocol to sort of address that, changed my diet, started doing yoga, kind of tried to de-stress. And I actually got a little bit better. There were a couple years after I started doing the protocol that I was living a fairly normal life. I started taking on more work, worked longer hours, and started into a relationship and hung out with my friends a lot, and life was okay. But unfortunately, I chose the wrong person. And so I was in a really, really stressful relationship that for about 5 years that just continued to like tank my system. So the more stress I was in with that relationship, my body just kept declining. And eventually I reached a point where I couldn't sustain it anymore. So I left that partnership and moved in with my parents for like what I thought would be 6 months because I just thought, oh, I just need like 6 months to like catch my breath, like, not have any responsibilities, go easy on myself. I was working less hours at work and really, really trying to heal diligently because I was, again, trying to follow the adrenal fatigue protocol. I saw like a specialist in Pennsylvania. I'm in Utah, so I flew all the way out to Pennsylvania to see this guy, and he was wonderful, amazing, amazing, amazing doctor. And but unfortunately, like what was going on with me was deeper than the physical. And by I think it was about December 2014, I kind of had like the straw that broke the camel's back moment. So I was rear-ended while I was sitting at a stoplight and like very gently. So like no damage to my car. I didn't think about this until years later. This is what's kind of funny. I like put the pieces together after, but I had a mild whiplash, and I had like I felt my brain slosh in my head, which was the grossest feeling. And I had a little bit of like shock. But other than that, I was like, well, my car's not damaged, so it couldn't have hurt me very much. I had a few adjustments at the chiropractor and kind of went about my business, but I continued to decline. And from that, like 2 weeks after that accident, my nervous system just completely fractured. And I don't like talking about symptoms, and I know we don't like focusing on symptoms. However, I do think it's important to sort of illustrate like what was going on so people can identify with how bad it was, because I want to give people hope that if things could be that bad for me and I could get better, that they can. Um so I always call it like I felt like I fell into like this abyss of nothingness. I all the hypersensitivities came on board. I was sensitive to light, sound, movement, EMFs. I couldn't even read words on a page without blacking out. So I was literally my life's goal was to remain conscious, because I would just lay there in my bed trying to not like lose consciousness. It was pretty awful. In addition, I had somewhere around 30 to 40 other symptoms going on all the time. Lots of gut issues like gastritis. I was in pain all the time. I was reacting to all the foods, terrified to eat anything, had gastroparesis. So I wasn't even digesting food. Like my whole nervous system just shut down. And, it's that wired and tired thing. So like there's all the stuff that's like not functioning, and then everything that's in that heightened state. And so couldn't sleep, insomnia, body shocks, weird stuff. Just like I would have like these convulsions and just all kinds of crazy things, and pretty scary. But also I had learned after, I don't know, 12 years of dealing with, mainstream medical doctors, that like they weren't going to help me. So, a normal person might have gone to the emergency room, but I was like, I'll just be worse. I knew it. So I was able to continue working with my doctor long distance. We had to facilitate those conversations through my mom because I couldn't speak on the phone. Um, yeah, I really couldn't function at all. I had to crawl to the bathroom. I remember my mom was like, well, she wanted to like put a potty chair in my room. And I was like, that's where I draw the line. I will crawl to the bathroom. I cannot, I can't go there. So I was determined that I was going to sort of control like my descent. But yeah, it wasn't a fun experience. And I stayed in that kind of place for several months, like probably about 4 months, before I got a little bit of stabilization. But then I was still pretty much bedbound, housebound for about 3 years. And so that was, but the whole time I was like determined, right? I was still trying to heal. That was like the phase where I did a lot of like spiritual work, um, things like the body code, the emotion code, and like those things were all great. I don't want to like knock those at all. They didn't really move the needle for me, but I think they helped me to kind of maintain hope, have something to focus on, feel like I was like doing something to get better. At one point, I did like 5 hours of Joe Dispenza meditations a day, because I kept thinking like, well, also, this is a part that's important to tell, is like, I was told that it was all in my head, not just by doctors, but like by people in my life. So I felt so blamed, and I thought like, okay, well, if I've created this or caused this, then I'm determined I'm gonna, fix it. So I kept trying to uh, fix my mindset and think about it differently. And there was like, yeah, it was a really, really hard moment. I was just holding on by a thread, just doing everything I could, determined to try and get myself out of the shame spiral of having caused myself to be dependent and debilitated. Because I knew it was hard on my family. They had to support and care for me. So
Teresa, wow, I've had goosebumps while you're telling this story. I just, much of it resonated and reminded me of my own, but then much of it was much worse. And I just think, wow, how incredible that you are here, sitting here today. During those really rough, bedbound, crawling to the bathroom years, how did you get yourself to keep finding hope and keep mentally picking yourself back up and not giving up?
yeah, I don't know. I feel like that sort of came from outside of me. There was a deep determination to heal. And I don't know. I think obviously there were many moments that I wanted to give up. Like I think many of us have been there. Um, but I do feel like, having a sort of spiritual belief or spiritual connection was helpful for me. It kind of kept me tethered to this world, and helped to make me feel less alone. And I would try to visualize, a life beyond illness. And a lot of that revolved around like, okay, when I get out of this, when I figure this out, I'm going to help other people. So there was this driver to get well so that I could help other people get through something that was as horrible as I was. So that kind of helped drive me forward.
It's interesting too to hear your journey spanning back so long because it's reminding me of things that I'd completely forgotten about. Like for a time, we were obsessed with adrenal fatigue and candida overgrowth. Like these two things were taking us down and fixing them was the answer to everything. And now I don't really hear anyone talking about these things.
Yeah.
Not saying that they aren't real, but it just doesn't seem to be. I was so fixated on these things. And yeah, so there's just been these sort of phases or misconceptions or just our focus being in the wrong place
Yeah.
for quite a long time.
Yeah.
And with things that are really hard to fix. Like, I don't know how to fix my adrenals.
Yeah.
But yeah.
For sure. And I had that thought. I framed it as my adrenals for years. And it really hasn't been until like the last 2 years that I've been like, was that really true? Was that the
Yeah.
driver? I don't know. I don't know. So it's interesting now that I'm in a different place and I'm on the other side of it. I have questioned a lot of the narratives I had to explain what was happening to me because I don't necessarily see them the same way, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another really important thing that you pointed out was how you were so sick and you said, any sane person or just you would think that person would just check themselves into the hospital. And I remember thinking, because I grew up with a mother, as many people know, who had CFS, and I always worried about getting it myself. And I thought, if I ever did, I'm just checking myself into the hospital and I'm not leaving until somebody figures this out. And how naive that was, because there were no doctors that were pretty much going to figure it out, especially back then. And it just really compounds our experience of helplessness and terror.
Yeah, it does.
I feel like I'm dying and I can't even go to the hospital because I'm just going to feel worse and leave, chances are, with nothing. I mean, these days there are some incredible doctors who do know what to do, but they're still very much the minority.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So, how did you progress from there? You obviously started to find things that were going to help you. What did that look like?
So I kind of divide it into like a couple of different. So there's like the physical things that I did that helped because there were some like obviously um my nervous system was overwhelmed from chronic stress, right? And we have stress from many different areas, right? We have like physical stress, biological stress, emotional stress, mental stress, all that kind of stuff. And so mine had like a combination of all those. And so some of the physical interventions that really helped. The first one was a cavitation surgery. And I don't know if you're familiar with cavitations, dental cavitations. I found this out through a holistic dentist. I'd gone to see them because I had like such sensitive teeth because I had like enamel erosion from reflux and like all the stuff that was going on with my gut. And I was in so much pain and I thought maybe they could like remineralize my teeth. And so went there and they ended up doing like a CT scan of my head and found these pockets of infection in my jawbone. And it was from routine wisdom tooth extraction, which happens to some people. You can like remove a tooth, whether it's a wisdom tooth or a regular tooth, and it can leave behind like a little pocket where infection can set in. So that was happening to me. And when the dentist came out to look at the scans, she said, "Oh my gosh, you could park a car in those. They were so big." So I had really big, like hidden infections in my body, and so I did a surgery in 2019 to address those. And they told me it'd be about 6 months. Like you go downhill for a while and then your body starts to boost a little bit. And so that's what happened to me. I finally felt the first like stabilization. It wasn't 100%, but I could see like a clearing. And so that gave me some momentum. And then the other thing I did physically that was really helpful was upper cervical chiropractic work, which again, that was helpful because it addressed, some stuff in my nervous system. And having had that accident, going back to my little fender bender, I had whiplash, and your first two vertebrae in your neck are very, very sensitive. And like those being out of alignment can really affect your nervous system. So I think that was a piece, in hindsight. And that really helped stabilize my gut, a lot of the other things that were going on. And so that was really helpful. But I did tons of physical things that weren't detoxification. I did like true cellular detox, spent $5,000 on a chiropractor, and that didn't do anything. Coffee enemas, like the radical diet changes. hypnotherapy, and like I said, all the crazy spiritual work, not crazy, all the wonderful spiritual work that helped me but didn't help me. And so those were kind of the things that I tried at first. And then it was right after I did the cavitation surgery that I kind of started seeing like the mind body connection a little more deep. And this is what really shifted things for me, as it does for many people, right? We try all that other stuff, kind of doesn't really go anywhere, or it helps a little bit. But ultimately, it was looking at my trauma. So I had, some pretty deep childhood trauma. I had trauma in my relationship. I had a lot of chronic stress, and so I started doing some work with a therapist. I started to look at myself and my patterns, and I had a lot of codependency patterns going on. I had zero boundaries, didn't even know what that was. And a lot of people like identify as being like an empath, like we're highly sensitive to other people's emotions. And I identified that way. And then I was like, oh, I'm a codependent. No wonder. Like, I think codependency and being an empath are kind of like the same thing. So learning to address that codependency was so helpful. Like being able to like differentiate between like, oh, I am me and you are you, and we're different people. We are not the same thing. It kind of like honestly brought back safety to my nervous system, because it was like, oh, I don't have to manage other people's emotions. I can just pay attention to my own, and I can actually set boundaries and have needs. And, like I felt like that sort of started to solidify my sense of self, which brought back so much safety. And that was incredibly helpful. I had never been taught how to work with my own like emotional activation. So doing a lot of that sort of somatic work, I did somatic experiencing with a practitioner for a while, where she just taught me how to like be with sensations in a titrated way where I wasn't overwhelmed. And that was super helpful. And then I did a lot of like nervous system regulation stuff, took a lot of courses on that. And then, so like that's where I got like pretty stabilized. After I kind of did all of that stuff, I was feeling pretty good. And I was like, yeah, I can do this life thing. And then I needed to kind of like get back into the world. So I was like, well, what do I want to do? And every time I thought about going back to an office, I was like, nope, nope, I can't do that. That's not going to work. So I decided to take a coaching course because I wanted to eventually coach and support people. But I wanted to do something that was trauma informed, because I knew how much that had affected me. And I didn't just want to do, not that there's anything wrong with this, but I didn't just want to do like health coaching or anything like that, because I wanted to go deeper into like the emotional aspect. I found this really great certification for trauma recovery coaching, and I started that. And that actually stabilized me even more. So like every time I'd have to like branch out and, do something that was stretching me, my nervous system would be like, oh yeah, we can do this. Yeah, we got this. And so I did that. And then that year, my first year, after I got certified, I was still kind of like, exploring different trainings. And that's when I came across pain reprocessing therapy, which is like the bomb. And it's really funny because the whole time I was sick, I'd heard of brain retraining, but I was so kind of resistant to it because of everybody saying like, it's all in your head. I was like, I'm not doing brain retraining. Like, I felt like it was me admitting that I was like faking my symptoms or something. I don't think I fully understood it. So when I finally came across pain reprocessing therapy, I decided to do the training before I even knew what it was, which is kind of embarrassing. But right before the training started, I kind of checked out Alan Gordon's work, and I had this like shoulder issue that had been going on for years, and it was pretty painful. But I'm stubborn, and I don't like pain. Was my least worrisome symptom. Like it was intense, but it just wasn't the one that bothered me the most. So I often ignored it. So anyway, I kind of was watching one of Alan Gordon's. He was taking somebody through a somatic tracking exercise, and I kind of followed along. And I was like, well, I'll just see what it does with my shoulder. And in that one session, it was like 70% better. And I was like, whoa, what? And then so that was so cool for me. And then I just continued to do it over the next like 2 or 3 weeks, and it completely resolved. This thing that had been there for years was gone. And I was like, I thought it was physical, because it felt like it was like my tendons were being pulled off of my bone, and like, no, it wasn't. It was neuroplastic. And so that was my first introduction into like the brain, the brain's role in all of these symptoms. And it was so interesting to me. And so I utilized it for a couple of different like lingering symptoms I had, and it was so powerful. And I was so excited to kind of bring it into my practice with clients. And it was really fun to like teach my clients this and see my clients, shifting and changing things. So that was another really powerful thing. And then the final thing that I think really shifted everything for me and kind of brought me full circle to like 100% recovered was the safe and sound protocol, which I know a lot of people have talked about on your channel. And so I did that uh, last year, actually. It was only a year ago. And I was pretty solid, but I kept having to go back to my chiropractor. Like every 3 weeks, I'd have to get like an adjustment for my upper cervical because I'd get like some digestive symptoms that would show up, and felt like I had to have him on speed dial. So um, I just did the safe and sound protocol because a friend had offered it to me, and it took me like 2 or 3 months to really notice the difference. But after like 3 months, I was like, wait, I haven't had to get an adjustment. That's weird. What's going on? And then it was 4 months, and then 5 months, and then 6 months. And I have yet, it's a year, and I still have yet to have a chiropractic adjustment. So that was cool to me because it had such an impact on something in my nervous system. I don't exactly know the mechanism. I just know that like I have not been the same since. And I also felt like this just deeper stabilization of just like ease in my body. So that was really cool. And I liked it so much that I trained to become a SSP provider. So, because I thought it'd be a really great tool for my clients. So that's kind of, yeah.
Wow. So much great stuff there. The safe and sound protocol, even I'm losing track. There's so many things that people talk about on the channel. So can you explain just a little bit about what that is?
Yes. So it is a 5 hour, it's 5 hours of music that you listen to. And the goal of it is to bring your nervous system, kind of like call your nervous system back to like the parasympathetic or the ventral social engagement state. And when you're in that state, or when your nervous system feels comfortable being in that state, that's where you're going to be, in a state of healing, regulation. It's really powerful. And so it utilizes like these 5 hours of music, and it's done so there's 5 separate hours. So for each hour is different, and they sort of progress off the other. And so it's regular music. So you won't even notice anything. Like you listen to it and it's just like normal, regular music. But it's filtered in a specific way to bring in tones that are in the middle frequency. So when your ear takes in those tones from the middle frequency, they stimulate your social engagement system. And so it's almost like an exercise program for your social engagement ventral vagal state. And it helps it almost like wakes your ears up to hearing those sounds, so that it starts reaching for those middle frequencies instead of higher and lower frequencies. So higher frequencies might be like a baby crying or a woman screaming, which are like signals of danger. And low frequencies might be like, thunder or a lion roaring, which are also signals of danger. But like the human voice is in the middle frequency. So that's why it kind of brings us into that social engagement state. And it can be really powerful. It's very passive and it's gentle. So it's really good for people who are not able to do a lot. It can kind of help just kind of jumpstart their nervous system into like, kind of relaxing and letting go a little bit. But I love it. It's a powerful, powerful tool.
Wow, that is incredible. And I just think it's so great that you're now out here doing the work that you do, because the whole time you've been talking, I'm thinking you've got to be one of the world's experts on these conditions after all that you've been through and all that you've learned. It's really incredible. You mentioned a couple times sort of like you see things a little bit differently about your illness in your journey. So having been through all that you've been through, looking back, do you understand it differently, or how do you understand it now?
Yes. So once I learned about the brain's role, I understood that so our brain turns on symptoms in an attempt to protect us, right? It's trying to get our attention about something. Um, and I didn't know that it was the brain turning on the symptoms. And honestly, the brain turns on the symptoms no matter what the cause is. If you have a virus in your body, the brain turns on your immune system, right? But the brain can make mistakes, and sometimes it can turn on your immune system when there's absolutely nothing like truly dangerous. It's just a mistake in something. It's perceiving an emotion as dangerous or whatever. And so looking at that now, I'm like, oh, okay. Like I really thought there was a physiological underlying driver of my illness. And I don't think there was. Like even my adrenals, because I started to kind of question that a couple years ago. Because I'd be like, oh, every time I kind of like felt myself kind of dip a little bit, I'd be like, oh, I got to take my adrenal cortex, or Like I was using it like this way to control what was happening. And after a while, I was like, well, maybe I'll just sit with this and see what happens to my body. Like maybe I'm just having a dip. And so I would do that and I would stop. I wouldn't take the Cortex. And I'm like, oh, same thing happened. It was sort of, it was kind of a crutch for me for a long time because I had that narrative about what was happening. And when I really learned to just like presence my symptoms, that was enough. I didn't need, and it's not to say that like maybe the adrenals really are flagging, right? Because you can take tests and you can see that the hormonal levels are lower or whatever. But I also think that the brain controls all of that. Like it controls all of the hormones and like everything like that. So it's just I've just realized like I don't necessarily have to use, herbs or medicine or supplements to fix the thing. I can just kind of sit with and be with it and presence it. And then my brain will get the message that like, oh, okay, well, we can reverse that. That's cool. Um, so that's been really awesome. Like it feels like freeing, right? Because I can like if I have like a little glitch in my system, instantaneously it can turn off, just by being curious about it, just by not making it a big deal and not trying to fix it or fight with it. Just being like, oh yeah, here's my brain doing a thing. Here's my body doing a thing. It's okay, no big deal. And then suddenly it isn't a big deal. It goes away.
Yeah, it's mind blowing once you start to learn about and understand how symptoms are created in the body in any condition. Because I think most of us used to just think that like pain and suffering was just an unfortunate part of life and it just happened when you got the flu or you got injured, and as a result of these events you would feel things in your body. But no, it all has a purpose. It's there for a reason, and it's generated by the brain no matter what's happening. Like I love, you talked about Alan Gordon. I love from his book The Way Out, he talks about an example of a guy working on a construction site. I don't know if you've heard this one. And he stepped on a giant nail, went straight through his boot, and he's screaming in pain and in agony, and they rush him to the hospital and all the drama. Doctors carefully remove his boot and find out that the pain or the nail just went straight between his toes and there was zero damage. And then as soon as he saw that, the pain went away.
Yeah.
So was the pain not real? The brain was creating that symptom in a response to seeing that nail go through the foot and like, danger, danger, pay attention. So whether it was a structural thing or a nervous system thing, like all those symptoms are being generated by the brain and nervous system, which is such a important thing to understand when you're looking at these conditions, and such a hard thing to wrap your head around because none of us have been taught any of this in our life.
No, and it's hard to like, it was really hard for me to buy into. Like, I mean, took me years. I wish like I could have understood that earlier, but like it was what it was, So now like I try and I like Alan Gordon, I think does such a great job of explaining that concept without shame. Like he makes it, he really normalizes the whole thing because he's like, this, everybody works this way. We've all had neuroplastics. Whether you have chronic illness or not, everybody has had it at one point. So you're not crazy. There's nothing wrong with you. You're normal. This just happens sometimes. So
yeah, I love how he says, patients often say, well, does this mean my symptoms aren't real? And he says, do you feel them? Like, yes. It's like, then they're real. Yeah. Like they're not any less real than any other symptoms. That pain with the guy in his boot wasn't any less real just because it was a mistake alert that the brain set off. Yeah. So with your work now that you're doing with clients, what does that look like? Tell us about that.
So I am a mind-body integrative coach, and I sort of help clients like figure stuff out. Like we walk through everything that's going on with them and sort of figure out where their triggers are, kind of what the underlying drivers of illness are. I sort of help them explore what's happening and find the right support. So, my background is in trauma recovery coaching, but I've also done a lot of mind body stuff. And so I sort of integrate those things. I don't ever process trauma with clients. That's not what I do as a coach, but I help clients deal with what's showing up in the here and now. So if you have symptoms showing up in the here and now, I help clients learn how to normalize that, learn how to presence it, and identify like their own stressors and the things that are contributing to their own illness. Like I kind of help them explore what that is, because sometimes it's really hard to know and identify that stuff by yourself. I also offer traditional just pain reprocessing therapy, and the safe and sound protocol. And at some point I will have I'm working on putting together some courses so people can kind of explore this in their own way, on their own timeline. So that'll be exciting when that kind of comes out. And for now, I do one-to-one coaching. And I also offer, so if people are interested in, I have a free support group. It's through Meetup, and it's through something called Circle of Connection. I think, what did I call it? Circle of Connection, Resilience, and Wellness groups. So if you can find that on Meetup, I have a lot of, like, every other week, I've got a Thursday meeting that people can show up to with chronic illnesses. And then I may at some point start a specific group for people with CFS. So that's kind of a cool place to show up. We just kind of, it's just an open share where people can just kind of talk about what's going on.
Wow, how incredible. And of course, we'll make sure that all of this is linked in the description. And for people watching, listening, I've done enough of these interviews to know when we have gold, this is gold. I know that, Teresa, without a doubt, you're going to be flooded with people, wanting to connect, wanting to get support. So for people listening and watching, if this resonates, if this seems like it's something that could be good for you, I would recommend getting in touch sooner rather than later, so you can get yourself to the front of the line. Because, oh my goodness, what I would have given, Teresa, to have had the ability to work with someone like you during my recovery, someone to tell me to stop the coffee enemas.
Yeah.
Oh, just that alone would have been worth its weight in gold. Oh, thank goodness.
I know. Oh, that's awesome.
How did we ever think that was the answer? Yeah. So for people watching and listening, what's one big thing or takeaway that you'd want them to know about recovery from these conditions?
So I would want people to know that it, like, everybody's recovery looks different. There are those people who have like instant recoveries, and I love those stories and wanted that for myself, but that was not how it went for me. It took me years of slow and steady progress. Sometimes 2 steps forward, 1 step back, sometimes 1 step forward and 3 steps back. So I really want to emphasize that no matter what the trajectory looks like for you, you can still heal, and to just take it 1 step at a time and keep trusting the process, and don't let yourself get discouraged. Like, keep going. Like, whatever you do, just keep going.
I was smiling while you're sharing that because I was envisioning, like, I want to get a shirt made that says, rapid success is the exception, not the norm. Because it's we want to cling on to those couple of stories that we hear that are incredible, but yeah.
Amen.
Yeah, for the overwhelming majority of people, this is a slower process and a lesson in patience and kind of ups and downs and back and forth, and that's normal and that's okay. And it doesn't mean you're not recovering, and it doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It's just this is typically how it goes. So yeah, I think that's really important. Well, Teresa, I know you have an amazing YouTube channel too, so we're going to link that up here for people to check out. Really good stuff there. I'm so excited. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for being here. Every word of this has been pure gold. Just really appreciate you taking the time to share all of this today.
Thank you, Raelan. I really appreciate you. I love all you do.
And thanks to those of you watching and listening. And I hope you will take some time to check out Teresa's website and her YouTube channel and everything else that's linked in this description and on the screen, because she's got clearly a lot of insight and knowledge and training that is very valuable for people facing these sorts of conditions.